I watched my daughter's lips turn blue as poison coursed through her veins. The HOA Karen next door thought she could eliminate my disabled child and get away with it. But she didn't know I'm a senior doctor. She had no idea what was coming for her. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. For 23 years, I've worked as a senior physician in pediatric intensive care. I've held the hands of dying children. I've delivered news that shattered families. I've seen suffering that would break most people. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened to my own child. My daughter Emma is 8 years old. She has cerebral palsy, a condition that stole her ability to walk, to speak clearly, to eat normally. But it never touched her spirit. Emma communicates through a tablet device, and her words are filled with more joy than most people experience in a lifetime. She attends school with an aide. She loves painting, even though her hands shake. She laughs at silly jokes. She dreams of becoming an artist one day. Emma receives all her nutrition through a feeding tube. Every morning at 7, I prepare her formula in our kitchen. I measure everything precisely. As a doctor, I know exactly what her body needs. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I kissed Emma's forehead, connected her feeding tube, and started the pump. Then I left for my shift at the hospital. I was in the middle of examining a patient when my phone rang. It was Beth, Emma's caregiver. Dr. Mitchell, something's wrong. Emma is vomiting. She's turning pale. Her breathing. I didn't let her finish. I ran. I broke every speed limit. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I'm a doctor. I save children every day. But this was my child. My Emma. When I burst through the door, Emma was lying on the couch, her small body convulsing. Her lips had a blue tinge. Her eyes were rolling back. Beth was crying, holding her hand. My medical training kicked in. I checked her vitals. Her heart rate was erratic. Her pupils were dilated. This wasn't a simple reaction to her feeding formula. This was poisoning. I called an ambulance, but I knew we didn't have time to wait. I scooped Emma into my arms and drove to the hospital myself. Beth sat in the back, cradling Emma's head, whispering prayers. The emergency room staff recognized me immediately. They moved fast. Within minutes, Emma was hooked up to monitors, receiving fluids, getting her stomach pumped. I stood there in my daughter's blood and vomit, watching the numbers on the screen, praying they would stabilize. Dr. Rahman, my colleague and friend, took charge. He ran every test imaginable. Blood work. Toxicology screens. Urine samples. 3 hours later, he pulled me into a private room. His face was grave. Sarah, I need you to sit down. Just tell me, Rahman. What is it? We found rat poison in her system. A significant amount. Specifically, brodifacoum. It's a powerful anticoagulant. If you hadn't brought her in when you did. He didn't need to finish. I knew what brodifacoum did. Internal bleeding. Organ failure. Death. How? I whispered. How did it get into her system? That's what we need to figure out. The police are on their way. The police. My daughter had been poisoned, and now this was a criminal investigation. Detective Maria Santos arrived within the hour. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes that had clearly seen too much darkness. She interviewed me, Beth, and every staff member at Emma's school. She examined our home, our kitchen, every bottle and container we owned. Nothing made sense. I was meticulous with Emma's care. I prepared everything myself. I kept all her supplies locked in a cabinet. No one else had access. Except, one person did. Her name was Patricia Henderson, though everyone in the neighborhood knew her as the HOA president. She was 62 years old, with perfectly styled gray hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. She had lived in our community for 15 years and ruled it like a tyrant. Patricia had made our lives miserable from the day we moved in. She complained about Emma's wheelchair ramp, saying it violated HOA aesthetic guidelines. She reported us for having medical equipment visible through our windows. She circulated a petition trying to prevent Emma from using the community pool, claiming her feeding tube was unsanitary. 2 weeks before Emma was poisoned, we had a heated confrontation. Patricia had placed a violation notice on our door because Emma's specialized van was parked in our driveway instead of the garage. The van didn't fit in our garage. I tried to explain this to her. "Rules are rules, Dr. Mitchell," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "If we make exceptions for you, we'll have to make exceptions for everyone. My daughter is disabled, Patricia. This vehicle is modified for her wheelchair. We need it accessible. Your daughter's condition is not my concern. The HOA bylaws are clear." Something inside me snapped. "You heartless woman. Does it make you feel powerful, targeting a disabled child?" Her face twisted with rage. "How dare you speak to me that way? You people think you're special because of your sob story. You think you can break rules because your daughter is defective. Well, you can't. I will make sure you follow every single regulation, or I will force you out of this neighborhood." She called my daughter defective. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said quietly, "Stay away from my family." She smiled then. A cold, cruel smile. "Or what, doctor? Will you write me a prescription?" When Emma was poisoned 2 weeks later, Patricia was the first person I thought of. Detective Santos took my suspicions seriously. She investigated Patricia's background. What she found was disturbing. Patricia had filed 37 HOA complaints in the past year alone. 12 of them targeted families with disabled or elderly members. She had a pattern of harassment that bordered on obsession. The detective interviewed other victims of Patricia's cruelty. An elderly veteran with PTSD had been fined repeatedly for leaving his service dog's toys in his yard. A widow with MS had received violation notices for her handrails being the wrong color. A family with an autistic son had been reported to child services by Patricia, who claimed their child's stimming behaviors constituted a disturbance. Each story painted the same picture, a woman who viewed anyone different as a threat to her perfect neighborhood vision. A woman who wielded HOA rules like weapons. A woman without mercy or conscience. But having a nasty personality wasn't proof of attempted murder. Then the detective made a breakthrough. She obtained security camera footage from various homes in the neighborhood. Our home didn't have cameras, but our neighbor across the street did. And their camera captured something remarkable. The footage showed Patricia entering our property 3 times in the week before Emma was poisoned. Each time was during the day, when I was at work and Beth had taken Emma to therapy appointments. Each time, Patricia spent approximately 10 minutes inside. How did she get in? Detective Santos asked. I remembered then. Patricia had claimed there was a gas leak 2 months ago. She insisted on having keys to every home in the neighborhood for emergency access. Like a fool, I had given her a copy of ours. The detective obtained a search warrant for Patricia's home. What they found made my blood run cold. In Patricia's garage, hidden behind paint cans and garden supplies, they discovered a box of rat poison. The same brand. The same type. And it was half empty. They also found something else. A journal. Page after page of Patricia's handwritten notes, detailing her hatred for families she deemed problematic. Our family had an entire section. She had written about Emma in terms so vile, so dehumanizing, that even the detective looked shaken reading them. One entry read, "The Mitchell child is a parasite. Draining community resources. taking up space in the school that normal children deserve. Her mother parades her around like she's something special. She's not. She's defective. Broken. An embarrassment. Another entry, from 3 weeks before the poisoning, saw the creature at the pool today. Other children stared. Parents whispered. Good. They should be uncomfortable. This isn't what we signed up for when we bought homes here. This is a community for normal, successful families. Not charity cases. The final entry, dated the day before Emma was poisoned, read, "Some problems solve themselves. Others need help." Detective Santos showed me these entries in her office. I sat there, reading my daughter described as a creature, a parasite, an embarrassment. Each word was a knife to my heart. How could anyone harbor such hatred for a child? For my sweet Emma who had never hurt anyone. She's sick, I whispered. Mentally ill. She knew exactly what she was doing, Detective Santos replied grimly. This journal shows premeditation. Planning. This wasn't a snap decision, Dr. Mitchell. She thought about hurting Emma for months. She enjoyed thinking about it. Patricia was arrested on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there, but neighbors told me she screamed the entire time. She insisted she was being framed. She claimed she was the real victim. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Emma was still in the hospital, recovering. The poison had caused internal bleeding in her stomach and intestines. She needed multiple transfusions. She was in pain, confused about why this was happening to her. One evening, as I sat by Emma's bedside, reading her a story, Patricia's lawyer called me. He wanted to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met in a small conference room at the courthouse. Patricia's lawyer was a slick man in an expensive suit. He smiled too much. Dr. Mitchell, my client wants to apologize. Your client tried to murder my daughter. That's not proven. But Mrs. Henderson recognizes that her actions may have been misinterpreted. She's willing to offer a settlement. A generous one. Enough to cover all of Emma's medical expenses and then some. In exchange, you drop the charges. I stared at him. You're serious? Very serious. Mrs. Henderson is a respected member of this community. She's made some mistakes, yes, but she's not a criminal. This trial will destroy her reputation. Surely, we can reach an understanding. An understanding, I repeated slowly. Your client poisoned my 8-year-old daughter. She poured rat poison into her feeding tube. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what brodifacoum does to a child's body? The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Mitchell. It causes internal hemorrhaging. Bleeding in the brain. In the organs. Emma couldn't tell me she was in pain because her speech is limited. She couldn't understand why her own body was betraying her. She looked at me with so much trust, so much confusion, and I couldn't protect her. I couldn't save her from the monster who did this. Mrs. Henderson is not a monster. She made an error in judgment. I stood up. Tell your client that there will be no settlement. Tell her that I will testify at her trial. Tell her that I will use every resource I have to ensure she spends the rest of her miserable life in prison. And tell her that Emma, my beautiful, defective daughter, survived. She survived because she's stronger than Patricia Henderson could ever be. I walked out. The trial began in early September. The prosecution had a strong case. They had the security footage. They had the rat poison found in Patricia's home. They had her journal entries. They had the toxicology reports showing the exact match between the poison in Emma's system and the poison in Patricia's garage. Patricia's defense tried to create reasonable doubt. They argued that anyone could have planted the evidence. They suggested that Emma might have accidentally ingested poison somewhere else. They painted Patricia as a dedicated community volunteer being persecuted for enforcing rules. But then the prosecution called me to the stand. The prosecutor asked me to describe the day Emma was poisoned. I told them everything. The blue lips. The convulsions. The terror I felt driving to the hospital, not knowing if my daughter would survive the car ride. Then he asked me about Patricia's harassment. I described the complaints, the violations, the constant targeting. I repeated Patricia's words, "Your daughter is defective." The courtroom was silent. The defense attorney tried to discredit me during cross-examination. He suggested I was biased, emotional, vindictive. He implied that I was using my position as a doctor to manipulate the jury. "Dr. Mitchell, isn't it true that you've had disagreements with several neighbors, not just Mrs. Henderson?" "No, that's not true." "Isn't it true that you once filed a complaint against another resident?" "Yes." "They blocked our driveway, trapping Emma's medical van. We had a doctor's appointment. I filed a complaint because it was an emergency." "So you're not above using the HOA system yourself when it suits you?" "I've never tried to kill anyone over a parking space." The jury actually gasped. The judge had to call for order. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Beth, Emma's caregiver, took the stand. She was nervous, wringing her hands, but her voice was steady. "I saw Mrs. Henderson leaving their house one day. I was returning with Emma from therapy. Mrs. Henderson looked startled when she saw us. She said she was checking for a gas leak. But I didn't smell any gas. And later, when I mentioned it to Dr. Mitchell, she told me the gas company had already checked weeks before. There was never any leak." "What did Mrs. Henderson do when she saw you?" the prosecutor asked. "She smiled at Emma. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was cold. And she said something I'll never forget. She said, 'Such a burden on your mother.' Emma heard her. Emma understood. I saw the hurt in that little girl's eyes. Beth started crying. I should have said something. I should have protected her better." Several jury members were wiping their eyes. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Attempted murder. Breaking and entering. Assault with a deadly weapon. Patricia showed no emotion as the verdict was read. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her face a mask. But when the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Patricia stood up. "I did what I did because that child doesn't belong in our neighborhood," she said clearly. "She's a drain on resources. She lowers property values. She's unnatural. Someone had to take action." The courtroom erupted. The judge pounded his gavel. Patricia's own lawyer looked horrified. "Mrs. Henderson," the judge said, his voice shaking with anger, "in my 40 years on the bench, I have never heard such a vile, inhumane statement. You targeted a disabled child. You poisoned her. You showed no remorse. You are a danger to society." He sentenced her to 25 years in prison. With her age and health, it was essentially a life sentence. As the bailiffs led Patricia away, she looked at me. Our eyes met. I saw no regret there. No humanity. Just cold, empty hatred. I felt nothing but relief. Emma came home from the hospital 6 weeks after the poisoning. She was weak, fragile, but alive. Her doctors said she would make a full recovery, though she would need monitoring for potential long-term effects. The first night home was the hardest. Emma refused to let me connect her feeding tube. She pushed my hands away, shaking her head frantically. Tears streamed down her face. "Baby, you need your nutrition," I said gently. She grabbed her communication device with trembling fingers. "Bad things come through the tube." Hurt me. My heart broke into a million pieces. Patricia hadn't just poisoned Emma's body. She'd poisoned her sense of safety. Emma was terrified of the very thing keeping her alive. I spent 2 hours that night sitting with Emma, holding her, talking to her. I explained that I would never let anyone hurt her again. I showed her how I prepared her formula, letting her watch every step. I had her school nurse come over to verify the formula was safe. I even tasted it myself, though it was designed for tube feeding and tasted awful. Finally, Emma let me connect the tube. She watched the pump with wide, fearful eyes the entire time. She didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand, ready to protect her from threats real and imagined. The neighborhood changed after Patricia's arrest. People who had been silent during her reign of terror suddenly came forward with their own stories of harassment and abuse. The HOA disbanded and reformed with new leadership focused on community support rather than rigid enforcement. Our new HOA president was a retired teacher named Mr. Chen. His grandson had Down syndrome. His first act was to install a proper wheelchair ramp at our house and remove every discriminatory rule Patricia had created. Neighbors we barely knew brought meals. They offered to help with Emma's care. They organized a fundraiser to offset our medical bills. They showed us the kindness that had been buried under Patricia's cruelty. But Emma struggled. She had nightmares. She was afraid of her feeding tube, even though she needed it to survive. She asked me through her communication device, "Why did the lady hurt me? How do you explain evil to a child? How do you tell your daughter that someone wanted her dead simply for existing?" I sat Emma down one afternoon. She was having a particularly bad day, crying because she'd had another nightmare about Patricia. "Emma, listen to me," I said, taking her hands in mine. "What happened to you wasn't your fault. It had nothing to do with who you are. Patricia was broken inside. Some people are born without the ability to feel compassion. They look at differences and feel threatened instead of curious. They see beauty and want to destroy it because they can't understand it." Emma typed, "She called me defective." You heard that? I hear everything. People think I'm stupid because I can't talk right. But I understand every word. Tears filled my eyes. Oh, baby. You're not stupid. You're brilliant. You're kinder and braver than most adults I know. But am I defective? I pulled Emma into my arms, holding her close. Listen to me very carefully. You are not defective. You are different. Different and defective are not the same thing. Your brain works differently than mine. Your body moves differently. But that doesn't make you less. It makes you unique. It makes you Emma. And Emma is extraordinary. Am I defective? Emma asked. My heart shattered. No, baby. Never. You are perfect exactly as you are. You are brave and strong and beautiful. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Emma thought about this. Then she typed, "I feel sorry for her. For Patricia. She never felt love. That's sad." My 8-year-old daughter, who had been poisoned by a hateful woman, felt compassion for her attacker. That's when I knew Emma would be okay. Not because of her physical recovery, but because her spirit remained unbroken. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter. It was from Patricia, writing from prison. My first instinct was to throw it away without reading it. But curiosity won. The letter was 2 pages long. Patricia didn't apologize. Instead, she tried to justify her actions. She wrote about property values and community standards. She blamed me for forcing her hand by being unreasonable. She claimed she never intended to kill Emma, only to make her sick enough that we would move away. As if that made it better. The letter ended with a bizarre request, "I hope you'll consider visiting me. We're both educated women. We should be able to have a rational discussion about what happened." I wrote back. One sentence, rot in hell. I never heard from her again. Emma started attending a new school, one that specialized in supporting children with disabilities. She thrived there. She made friends. She discovered a talent for digital art, creating beautiful paintings using a stylus she could hold despite her tremors. One of her paintings was featured in a local gallery. It showed a girl with a feeding tube, surrounded by flowers and butterflies. The title was Still Growing. I cried when I saw it. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming pride. A year after the poisoning, Emma and I attended a support group for families affected by violent crimes. We met other parents, other children, all carrying their own scars. One mother approached me after a session. Her son had been permanently injured by a drunk driver. She asked how I managed to stay strong for Emma. I don't always feel strong, I admitted. Some days I'm so angry I can barely function. Some days I look at Emma and remember how close I came to losing her, and I can't breathe. But you keep going. I keep going because Emma keeps going. She's the strong one. I'm just trying to keep up. The woman smiled sadly. They're all so strong, aren't they? Stronger than they should have to be. She was right. Emma shouldn't have had to survive poisoning. She shouldn't have had to learn that people could be cruel enough to hurt children. She shouldn't have to be strong. But she was. And watching her resilience, her determination to keep smiling, to keep creating, to keep loving life despite everything, that gave me strength too. 2 years after Patricia went to prison, I received another letter. This one wasn't from Patricia. It was from her daughter, a woman named Jennifer whom I'd never met. Jennifer wrote that Patricia had died in prison. A heart attack. She was 64 years old. I don't expect you to mourn her, Jennifer wrote. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm writing because I need you to know that I'm sorry. I spent my whole life watching my mother spread poison, not just to your daughter, but to everyone around her. She was cruel to me too. She drove away my father, my brother, everyone who tried to love her. I should have stopped her somehow. I should have warned you. The letter continued, when I learned what she did to Emma, I wasn't surprised. I was horrified, but not surprised. That's the worst part. I knew she was capable of it. And I did nothing. I'm as guilty as she is. Jennifer asked if she could set up a college fund for Emma. I have no children. I inherited my mother's estate. It's blood money, and I don't want it. Please let me do this one thing to try to make amends. I discussed it with Emma, who was now 10 years old and mature beyond her years. What do you think? I asked. Emma considered carefully. Mom, you always tell me that people aren't their families. She didn't hurt me. Her mom did. That's true. Then we should let her help. Maybe it will help her feel better. So we accepted. Jennifer established a trust fund that would cover Emma's college education and future medical expenses. We met her once, briefly. She cried when she saw Emma, apologizing over and over. Emma hugged her. It's okay. I forgive you. You shouldn't, Jennifer whispered. I don't deserve it. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Emma said. It's about letting go. I watched my 10-year-old daughter teach a grown woman about grace, and I realized that Emma's disability had never been what Patricia claimed. Emma wasn't broken or defective or less than. She was, in fact, more fully human than Patricia could ever have been. Today, Emma is 12 years old. She still uses a wheelchair. She still has a feeding tube. She still struggles with tasks that other children find easy. But she's also an award-winning artist. She's a straight-A student. She volunteers at a center for disabled adults, teaching them to use communication devices. She's writing a book about her experience, hoping to help other children who face discrimination. Last month, Emma was invited to speak at a medical conference. She stood before 200 doctors and healthcare professionals and told her story. She spoke about the poisoning, about surviving, about forgiveness. Some people look at me and see what I can't do, Emma said, her voice steady through her communication device. They see the wheelchair. They see the feeding tube. They see limitations. But I'm not limited. I'm just different. And different isn't less. She got a standing ovation. Afterward, a young doctor approached me. She was crying. I have a daughter with cerebral palsy, she said. She's 3 years old. I've been so afraid for her. Afraid of how the world will treat her. But watching Emma, she gives me hope. That's when I realized that Patricia's evil had been transformed into something good. Emma's story, her strength, her grace, it was inspiring people. It was changing minds. It was making the world a little bit kinder. 3 years after the poisoning, Emma and I visited the cemetery where Patricia was buried. We didn't go to mourn. We went because Emma said she needed closure. We stood at the grave. It was a simple headstone. Patricia Henderson. 1962 to 2026, no epitaph. No loving words. Jennifer had told me that no one else had visited. Not once. Emma placed a single flower on the grave. Why are you doing that? I asked gently. Emma typed out her response, because she was human. Even monsters are human. That's the scariest and saddest part. My daughter, at 13, understood something profound. Patricia wasn't a monster from a fairy tale. She was a person who chose hatred. She was what happens when fear and cruelty go unchecked. She was a warning. We walked away from that grave together, Emma's wheelchair rolling smoothly over the grass, my hand on her shoulder. Behind us lay death and darkness. Ahead lay life, complicated, challenging, beautiful life. Emma looked up at me and smiled. I'm hungry. Can we get pizza? I laughed, the sound surprised out of me. Extra cheese. Obviously. That's how we left Patricia Henderson behind. Not with grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but with pizza and laughter and the simple joy of being alive. Because in the end, that was our revenge. We lived. We loved. We thrived. And Patricia, who tried to extinguish my daughter's light, died alone in the darkness she created. Emma's light still shines. Brighter than ever. Illuminating a path for others who struggle, who face discrimination, who are told they're less than. She is my daughter. She is disabled. She is extraordinary. And she is proof that love is stronger than hate, always. This story is dedicated to all families raising children with disabilities, and to the children themselves, the warriors who face each day with courage most of us can't imagine.